Hey, and welcome back to Thoughts from the Void with your host, Voidy.
I can attest, Sir Voidy's the best. He wouldn't dare play it close to the vest. He's here to share, from here into there, the writers and words of which he does care.
All right, and that was Rocky of Rocky's Thoughts, who created a jingle for this brand new segment of the show that we're using in this episode's intro. Anyway, thanks for having me here, Voidy.
The pleasure is all mine. Thanks for being here, Bradley.
So, what you been thinking about this week?
Oh, not much. Hard to think when so many people are shouting into me.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine that's rough. Have you tried talking back so they feel less alone?
Huh. And why the heck would I do that?
Well, it's just something to think about. Anyway, I gotta get to my podcast.
Wait, what? I thought this was my show.
Segment, Voidy. Segment. I'll see you next week, okay?
Wait, can we at least hear my jingle again?
Okay, fine. But only because you asked nicely.
I can attest, Sir Voidy's the best. He wouldn't dare play it close to the vest. He's here to share, from here into there, the writers and words of which he does care.
Sorry. Welcome back to the Saved as Draft podcast, the show where I, Bradley Ramsey, talk to you about the craft of writing, what I'm working on, and why you should care. And we're on episode 9. And not to bring down the mood, but I just want to be real with you all here. It's been a really crappy week. I've been dealing with some stressful stuff, and I just found out that one of my girlfriend Sarah's cats passed away last night. The cat didn't live with us. It was living with her ex, but she found out via text message, which really isn't the best way to figure these things out. So that was just another thing in a very, very long week. She was 16, so it was most likely old age, but one thing after another this week. I have 2 dogs and a cat myself, and they're my everything. I love having animals in my life. They give us so much love and happiness and joy, but they take a piece of us when they go, and it never gets any easier. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to have a moment of silence for Chloe and all of those who we've lost. And, I realize that I could have canceled the podcast this week, but those who know what I'm dealing with would agree that doing so would be letting the bad guys win. And as they say, the show must go on. So they're not going to be able to snuff out my creative fire, and they're certainly not going to stop the march of the Saved as Draft podcast, which I know a lot of people are looking forward to, myself included. So we keep going. All that aside, quick announcement. The registration form for the Spring Novel Writing Marathon will be live today, most likely. If you'd like to join, remember that you need to subscribe to the publication and then fill out the form as well so you can enter into one of the 3 tiers. Remember, those are based on which goal you're shooting for, so it can be 10K words, 25K words, or 50K words, depending on what you would like to accomplish as part of the challenge. So stay tuned for that. There'll be an announcement most likely later today, and then you'll be all set to subscribe and register. All right, let's get to this week's shoutouts. So once again this week, I opened a thread in my subscriber chat for people to share links, and once again, I've selected 5 at random to shout out for the show here. Keep an eye out on my subscriber chat on Tuesdays each week going forward, and that's when I'll post the podcast thread where you can share your stories and have a chance to get mentioned on the show. Like I said, every week I pick out 5 at random. Our first story this week is Hell of a Way to Make a Buck by Paul Dabrowski. This one has a killer opening that throws you right into the action with a good old-fashioned Arnold Schwarzenegger joke, and it even mentions cultists, all in the first 2 paragraphs. The story uses its flash fiction structure really well by focusing on intricate details of a single scene. The character is carrying a woman to a helicopter while being chased by the aforementioned cultists. It has great humor throughout, and the narration does a great job of crafting some pretty believable characters while also balancing the compelling action. It's a fun read. Our second story this week is The Teacher Who Grew a Mustache by John Murphy. And let me tell you, I desperately needed a good laugh this week, and John's story delivered in spades. There's an early mention of a mustache as a mouth toupee, which I haven't heard before. Let me tell you, I lost it when I read that. And the jokes don't stop there. The entire piece is filled with great jokes and a phenomenal sense of humor. The internal struggle of the story about trying to figure out how to grow the mustache, whether or not he should shave it, and then of course the ongoing journey of people's reactions and comments on it. It just makes it such a fun and hilarious piece from beginning to end. And it's one of those stories that tells a compelling tale while also mixing in a lot of humor and just enough stakes to make you care about the fate of the mustache in question. It's masterfully done, a really fun read. I can't recommend it enough. Number 3 is The Inconvenience of Eternity by Mary Ellen Brady. I just finished reading this one when I went to write the script, and I gotta say, this is my favorite story Mary Ellen has ever done, and honestly, one of the best stories I've ever read, hands down. In this piece, people stop dying. Mary Ellen explains how it works with all kinds of grim fates, but it's the way that she explores how society changes when people can't die that I found absolutely brilliant and extremely compelling. She also explores the mental effects of what would happen if we could suddenly live forever. And she does all of this in a short story. It's incredible and eloquent, and there's so much detail. It feels completely believable. And she sprinkles in just enough humor to keep things from being, existentially exhausting, right? She explores all these themes without ever lingering on any single one for too long. And the ending is so bittersweet and profound. I'm going to be thinking about this story for weeks, if not longer. I've tried to tackle similar themes in my work for many years now, but I'll be honest, I've never done it this well. I think that's part of the reason why the story resonated so much with me, but please, check this one out. You will be so glad you did. Story number 4 is A Spring Break from Hell, A Mom's Perspective by Substack writer Patty B. This story is about a mother trying to see her kids and helping them deal with numerous travel-related struggles as they try to come visit her. As someone who's suffered through the worst of what airports have to offer, I really sympathize with this story. Not only that, but the story offers up a really compelling introspective look about being a mother, which I thought was really well done. It discusses how parents want to be there for their children, obviously, but ultimately also have to let them handle certain things on their own so they can grow. This story explores all these themes really well, and it comes across as very heartfelt and genuine throughout. It's got a little bit of humor here and there for good measure, but at the end, it's just a really heartwarming and insightful read. I recommend you check it out. I really enjoyed it. Our 5th story this week is The Shadow's Rift by L.G. Wells. This is a prequel to L.G. Wells' other story, The Shadowheart, and in both cases, I think the most impressive aspect of these stories is the level of world building. There's a combination of really vivid imagery and some unique naming conventions that merge with other elements to create a world that feels like it's existed for years or even decades. To my knowledge, though, this world was created just for these 2 stories, which makes the depth and scope so impressive. Another unique element here is how LG mixes horror with fantasy in these tales. There's an excellent atmosphere of dread in both stories, and the villain in both pieces is incredibly well described, which makes the threat they pose all the more potent. If you enjoy fantasy, horror, or you've never experienced both at once before, these 2 stories will captivate and terrify you in equal measure. I highly recommend you check them out. And that's it for this week, but as always, you'll find links to the week's shoutouts in my show notes, and remember to drop your own work into the weekly podcast thread in my subscriber chat for a chance to have me review your story on the show in a future episode. Alright, time to look at which stories did the best for me in the last week on Substack. At number 1 with 453 views is How to Beat Imposter Syndrome. And I kind of knew this one would be the top story this week because everyone really seems to enjoy my articles on writing, which is honestly extremely humbling and very nice to see. I do appreciate all the support for those. This article is the longest piece I've ever done of its kind, coming in at just under 4,000 words. I also asked members of the community on Substack, Blue Sky, and Threads to share their thoughts and incorporate quotes from them throughout the piece. I feel like it turned out great, despite ironically getting imposter syndrome myself while trying to write it. In second place at 442 views is Mindful.me, Side A. This story was interesting because there's a Side A and a B that are both out now, and the way that it works is that in one version you get a certain perspective, and then in the other side you get the other perspective, and together, if you read Side A and B, you get the full picture. It's another example of how I like to experiment with my stories, and this one did really well, got some great feedback. Coming in at third with 423 views is a story I wrote last week called I Think, Therefore AI. This was one of my last Flash Fiction February stories, and I had a lot of fun with this one because it's set before the events of my novel that I'm working on, called For Those About to Vote. In this one, we see a new character who helps one of the 6 POVs from my novel with a heist involving an experimental AI that's inside of a robotic body. It's a fun one, and I would love it if you check it out, and stay tuned for more news on that novel that I'm working on. It's been in the works for a while. All right, and that's it for my top 3 stories this week. Thanks as always for reading and checking everything out. My views on Substack continue to climb steadily higher and higher, and the numbers blow me away every time I see them. It's very much appreciated. Next up is our weekly writing tip, and in this section we'll talk about kind of some writing tips. If you listened to last week's episode, we went through world building with Zechariah's article that I referenced, and this week I want to talk about how you can keep yourself writing when life gets stressful or when your mental health is less than ideal. When we're not feeling our best, it can be extremely hard to feel like writing at all, and if you're like me, not writing just makes you feel worse. I'm one of those people that always says that I need to write stories. My soul just craves creativity, if that makes sense. If I'm not writing, I don't feel like myself. Plain and simple. Now, as many of you know, I've had a really rough week, which is what brought up the idea to talk about this. I'm dealing with all kinds of personal stuff that's escalated into some larger legal issues with my ex, and it's just dredging up all kinds of old wounds that I wish had stayed in the past. I don't feel like any of it's necessary, and in my opinion, it's just, again, not necessary, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, things are stressful, and they can be stressful, and that happens to all of us. And if you're like me, you typically shut down and disassociate. You stop writing, you stop enjoying life, you stop being yourself. It's not good, it's not healthy. And honestly, I'm determined not to let it happen to me again because it's happened before. I've got too much going good in my life right now, and I'm not about to let this get me down. So, if you're facing a similar storm in your life, or you want to know what to do when things get difficult, here are my tips on how to write through the stress. I have an article with that title on Substack. It's one of the earliest ones I did, and I'll leave a link in the show notes, but this piece here will use some excerpts from it to kind of give you the idea. And there's 3 tips total, starting with tip number 1, which is to separate yourself from the stress. Whether you work in a home office, commute to work, or you're a hybrid employee that does a combination of the two, it's incredibly important that you separate yourself physically and mentally from the stresses of daily life. If you spend 8 hours a day in a spare bedroom like I do, don't use that room for writing your personal projects. I made this mistake for years, and more often than not, I found myself drained and burned out before I had even gotten to my creative writing. Sure, I was writing stories or scripts, but when I did it in that room, it still felt like work. You know, they say you can't heal in the place where you were hurt, and there's a reason for that. It's because spaces take on meanings in our brain, even if we don't realize it. It's context. When you walk into your home office or your job's main building, your mind transitions over to work mode. Your thought processes shift. Your posture changes. Your entire persona morphs. It's not a bad thing, but if you try to be creative in the same space where you're in that focused and professional work mode, you're going to be expending unnecessary energy trying to balance the two. So just like you have a space for work, have a space for your writing. It can be another spare bedroom, the couch in your living room. For me, I have a space downstairs, for example. It can even be a chair on your patio if you have a backyard, or a favorite coffee shop. Just find a space to dedicate to your creativity, and I guarantee you, your brain will thank you. Tip number 2 is share your victories and your struggles. If you're anything like me, the support of friends, family, and even strangers on the internet can be really motivating. It's a good idea to follow other writers and leave comments about their work in general, but the added benefit is that you can partake in the shared creative energy that exists across this community. That invisible force can really make the difference between a night of zero writing and reaching your word count for the day or week. And it's really simple too. You just have to be honest and put yourself out there. If you're feeling imposter syndrome, number 1, read my article from last week, but number 2, post about it. Struggling with a certain part of your book or your script? Post about it. Need to convince yourself that the idea you've been working on for years isn't horrible? Post about it. And specifically look for a pitch event where you can share your idea as part of a larger sort of pitch event type thing. And that will allow you to, connect with other writers, see their work, and get support on yours. I really love pitch events. And a little preview, we will be doing one during the spring novel writing marathon, so stay tuned for that. It'll be really fun. But the point is, you'll find that other writers are more than happy to jump in and support you however they can. Because I know I do, any chance I get. It's a simple thing, but it can drag you out of the mental trenches or break a bad case of writer's block. So next time you're stuck or feeling down on your work, just try talking about it. You'll be surprised how supportive people can be, especially on Substack. Tip number 3 is to go where the inspiration takes you. This final tip is going to sound a lot like I'm encouraging you to jump on every single idea that pops into your head, but to be perfectly clear, I'm not advocating that, mostly because it'll lead to a bunch of unfinished projects. But I think within reason, it's a fair approach. You see, inspiration is one of those things that feels amazing when you have it, but once it's gone, it can leave you unmotivated to do much of anything at all. It's a double-edged sword, which is why you shouldn't rely entirely on it to make yourself productive. Remember, the first draft of anything you write is the same as putting sand into a sandbox. The idea is that you're getting it together so you can build sand castles later. All that being said, if you do feel inspired to work on a specific project or story idea, just work on it. Even if it's not related to the book you're trying to finish. Even if it's a brand new story that might balloon into its own massive project. Even if it's a random idea for a poem that has nothing to do with your usual work. Just write it. It may sound counterproductive, but in my experience, writing begets writing. The more you do it, the more you'll find yourself wanting to do it. Think of it like warming up an engine so you can really hit the gas later. Okay? That's all for this week. But let me know if that helped, and like I said, you can check out the full article on this topic in the show notes if you're interested in reading more. Alright, next up is my weekly Substack soapbox rant, because I love my alliteration. Last week's rant was on AI, and I know it got a little intense. I would say that I'm trying to lighten things up, but after the week I've had, I'm going to flip it over to the other side. Last week we talked about how AI can't be creative because it's not human. Well, now we're going to talk about being human, which I know sounds like way too much of a topic for a subsection of a half-hour podcast, but don't worry, I'll do my best to keep the scope in check. No promises, though. As human beings, we are complex. We are layered. We are the product of our experiences, and while it's really amazing and profound that we can all be so similar yet so different, it also means that we have to be able to feel things. Lots of things. Good things, bad things, and things that stick around like a stain on the carpet that won't come out. And yes, that last one is a metaphor for trauma, which I won't get too deeply into here, but plenty of my stories talk about trauma. And in my opinion, that's what happens when something leaves a scar on your soul. It's a whole different beast. The point is, we as humans are infinitely complex, and therefore infinitely susceptible to all manner of physical and mental pain. It's amazing that we can feel so much and so deeply, but again, it's a double-edged sword. It means that if we want to enjoy the good, we have to suffer through the bad. Which brings me to the main focus of this rant: healing. You see, much like physical wounds, humans have the ability and the capacity to heal from some mental wounds as well, but it takes longer and a lot more work in my experience. In my opinion, it all starts when you separate yourself from the thing or the person or the people who hurt you. But that's not always possible. They say you can't heal in the place where you were hurt, but what if the place where you were hurt is your home? That's my struggle. And this week, I had some personal stuff come up that dragged me back into the past in a way that I really can't block or ignore as much as I'd like to. I have to face it, and it's ripping open some old wounds that I tried really hard to close. And it's just so exhausting, It's like, why can't we just erase the memories? Throw a band-aid on my brain with some mental neosporin that'll kill the bacteria living in there. It'd be so easy to fix my mental health by just eliminating the parts that hurt me. If we could do that for people, it would heal so much trauma. But there's a problem. We need those scars, because they made us who we are today. If you erase all that pain and suffering that I'm now experiencing again in my situation, you would also erase all the progress that I've made as a human being. I want to heal, but I also can't heal if the hurt is just erased. You see the problem? It's a paradox of trauma. It sticks with us, scars our soul, but then we grow past it, and that scar tissue is stronger than what was there before. It's simultaneously horrific, but also beautiful as time goes on. Think of it like a sculpture in a park. When it gets overgrown, it may be covered in vines, but that pop of color makes it more beautiful than it was before. And I'd like to reiterate that I'm speaking from personal experience here. Not all trauma leads to growth later on. Some things are just too horrific, and they leave nothing but pain and damage on our souls. I know that. And I'm by no means trying to downplay anything that others have been through. I'm just talking about my own personal experience. So I guess the rant here is that I wish things were easier. But I also know that if I didn't have the bad times, I wouldn't be able to appreciate the good ones. Trauma sucks. Healing is painful, but at the end of the day, it's our scars that make us human. So, from one human being to another, I hope you're doing all right. And if you're not, I just want to remind you, and myself, that the storm can't last forever. One of my favorite phrases is, "This too shall pass." And it's true. This will pass. I just have to keep my head above water in the meantime. If you're struggling, please know that I'm always here. You can DM me, tag me in a note, share a story with me, or anything else that would help. I'm here as a writer, but I'm also here as a human being, and I want to support both. Thanks for listening. All right, and our last segment for the week here is a little preview of what's coming up next week on Substack. So we got some good stuff happening despite everything else going on, and I'm going to be super busy on the personal front because I've got a few creative projects that I signed some contracts with, so I need to make sure those stay on time. So if I'm less active, that's what's happening. It's not a bad thing. I'm really excited about them, and I'll tell you about one right now, actually. I just recently signed a contract with this awesome new platform called Audio Mazes that I'm really excited to work with. So Audio Mazes is a new app that's launching soon that is focused on creating high quality and immersive audiobooks. But here's the cool part. They all have branching narratives, meaning that as you're listening to these stories, you're going to be able to hit these junctions where you can make decisions and the story will go in different directions. And there's multiple endings, which range from good to neutral to even bad endings. It's really, really, really cool. I applied to be an author with them, and I pitched a few ideas for some books to get started, and guess what? They accepted them. So right now, I'm actually working on my first book for Audio Mazes. And that means that I'll be doing a ton of writing behind the scenes in addition to what I post on Substack. As soon as I get the go-ahead to promote the book publicly, I'd love it if you check out the platform and maybe try joining for a month with their subscription model so you can listen to my book and maybe a few others. I think you'll be really impressed with the quality of everything. And honestly, your support would mean the world to me because then I can write more of these amazing, immersive, branching audio adventures. So keep an eye out for more information on that. But also this coming week, we're going to be ramping up to the launch of the Spring Novel Writing Marathon. This challenge will run from April 5th. I'm going to leave that in. I'm going to leave it in. This challenge will run from March 15th to April 15th. I combined the two somehow with smaller checkpoint challenges throughout. And we'll have kind of a pre-event challenge coming out soon as well before the 15th. As I said at the beginning, once the form is out later today, you can subscribe to the publication, and then you can register for either a 10K, 25K, or 50K words goal, and that will allow you to be eligible to win a bookstore gift card. Someone will be randomly picked from each tier to win that gift card at the end of the challenge. I'll include a link to more information on the challenge in the show notes, and like I said, registration should be open within the next 24 hours, so you can kind of get it all sorted and get ready to start working on your project. This coming week, I'll also be releasing some new stories that I haven't published on Substack yet, and that's going to be helpful for me because I'm going to be writing that book that I mentioned. But some of these new stories are going to be fresh and new to Substack, and I'm going to record audio narration for them, which I've never done before, so this is the best place to read them. To get you excited, I'll share a preview of what's coming over the weekend and probably into early next week. It's a 3-part story called Stalemate, and it's set in a world ravaged by war. The tagline for the story that I wrote was, "For them, the war never ended." Part 1 and Part 2 of the story will show 2 different perspectives that then collide in the finale in Part 3. And what's cool is that in Part 3, we're going to zoom out and switch to third person so you can get a feel for how both of the Part 1 and Part 2 POVs are feeling now that they finally met. Again, experimental, and you know I love that kind of stuff. It's a wild ride, and I know you're going to love the audio narration because I've read it out loud before without recording it, and I've got some great voices in mind to really immerse you into the story. So that's all I got for now, folks. Depending on how quickly I get that Audio Mazes book written, I may have a new writing article out in the next week, but we're going to have to wait and see how my bandwidth goes because I've got other projects that I haven't mentioned that I also need to make sure stay on track because some of them, like I said, involve contracts and deadlines. But before I go, I just want to once again thank everyone in the community for all of your love and support. I don't like to post about personal stuff online, but Substack has quickly become a place filled with my true friends. So I simply just didn't want you all to worry if I seemed off, because I'm not good at hiding those things. I wasn't expecting the amount of people that came out of the woodwork to support me either, and it really made this whole situation I'm dealing with feel a lot less terrifying, to be honest. It's a reminder that I'm not alone. and that nothing can stop me from continuing to grow and evolve as a writer, an artist, and a human being. This is my story, and I know that. And with your help, we can make sure it keeps going no matter what life tries to throw at me. So thank you again for your support. You are all such incredible, amazing people, and even better writers. I appreciate each and every one of you. So with that, let's get back to writing, shall we? I wish you all a safe and productive week. This is Bradley Ramsey, signing off.